Do you believe in curses? The Snowden family story began even with the slave trade. In 1865, the Snowden couple acquired a cotton plantation in Arkansas. This was land on which blood had previously been shed. It was here that powerless slaves experienced pain, torment, and unbearable suffering. It was here that the Snowden family decided to build a huge mansion and make it their family nest. This mansion was a symbol of family wealth and power, but later became famous for its grim history of a curse. The key figure in the family was Sally Snowden McKay, born in 1921. She grew up in an atmosphere of luxury and wealth. Sally studied at the best universities. As a teenager, she got married and moved to another state. But the first marriage did not work out, and at the age of 30, Sally married again to Mr. Harvey McKay, an actor living in New York. The woman gave birth to 3 daughters and was quite happy with her second husband. In the 1980s, Sally's father, the owner of the Snowden house, passed away. Sally's mother, despite her quite advanced age of 80, tried to keep the house and the business in proper condition, but it was not easy. In addition to the mansion, the Snowdens owned many real estate properties in this small town. Maintaining the huge mansion was not simple. Managing the Snowden house required full-time commitment. When Sally started having problems in her marriage, she decided that she needed a shakeup. The woman divorced Mr. McKay and returned to Arkansas to the house on the lake to take over the management of the family business and free her mother from extra responsibility and burden. Sally had not been to Snowden House for at least about 40 years. Now she herself was almost 70, and much had changed during that time. Her parents had built small cottages on the shore of the lake, which they rented out to vacationers. Upon returning to the family nest, Sally decided to settle in one of these mini cottages. In the 1990s, no one lived in the main building of the Snowden house anymore. It was rented out for holding celebratory events, and film studios began using the luxurious premises for filming. Sally managed all this process from her small, cozy cottage on the shore of the lake. However, she was the only resident there. Sally's nephew, Joseph Liebaker, was a successful musician. He played blues on the guitar. The man performed in local pubs. He was constantly invited by various groups to participate in city festivals. It was thanks to his musical career that Joseph was able to earn decent money and fully provide for his wife and children. One day, Joseph Liebaker came to visit in Arkansas, but later the man had to stay there forever. The thing is that the house where Joseph lived with his wife and children burned to the ground. During the investigation, it turned out that it was an intentional arson. While the man was away visiting the family estate with his family, burglars broke into the house. Among other things, they carried out several expensive musical instruments, as well as a huge amount of cash. After that, the criminals decided to destroy the evidence and set the entire house on fire. Everything that was dear to Joseph, everything that the man had collected bit by bit over many years, disappeared in an instant. From that moment, the life of the young and successful musician, as well as his family, was completely turned upside down. From a successful, well-off couple, they turned into homeless people. Now Joseph Liebaker had to rebuild his life in Arkansas from scratch. The man got a job as a teacher at the local high school and helped his Aunt Sally manage the family business. Life in Snowden House was peaceful and calm until September 10th, 1996, when a tragedy occurred. On that day, neighbors noticed smoke rising from the territory of the majestic mansion. They immediately called emergency services at 911. The arriving firefighters discovered that one of the cottages on the shore of the lake was completely engulfed in flames. The fire was extinguished very quickly, so the flames did not have time to completely destroy the crime scene. As soon as the police arrived, it became clear that this was a burglary and a double murder. The aunt and nephew, Sally and Joseph, were in one of the cottages on the shore of the lake, where both were found dead. The cause of death was not the fire and not smoke inhalation. Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more cases. This helps us a lot. Thank you. The autopsy showed that 75-year-old Sally Snowden McKay and 52-year-old Joseph Liebaker had been shot. The police immediately assumed that it was a botched robbery. Probably, the thief did not expect to run into the occupants of the cottage. Perhaps he was caught red-handed. The perpetrator got scared of responsibility and shot the only witnesses, and then panicked and set the house on fire to cover up the traces of the crime. The fate of the place where the young musician lived repeated itself, but this time, everything ended much more tragically for him. This time, Sally's nephew had no chance to start a new life. He died from a bullet from an unknown perpetrator. Soon, it turned out that the red Toyota Camry belonging to Sally had disappeared. Most likely, the criminal took the keys and fled the scene in the car. The police immediately sent out alerts, not suspecting that the car had already been found. Early in the morning, a local resident was driving along a winding road near the Snowden house and noticed an overturned red Toyota Camry in the ditch on the side of the road. He got out of the car to figure out the situation and saw a huge dent on the front of the vehicle. The resident thought that the driver had sustained serious injuries and hurried to the wrecked car to help, but there was no one inside. Probably, the injured person had gotten out on his own and gone for help. The person who found the Toyota ran to the nearest store and told them about the overturned car. The store owner immediately understood which car they were talking about. The man knew perfectly well that only one person in the area drove a car of this make, and it was Sally Snowden McKay. The store owner and the one who found the car went to the mansion and saw that it was already full of police. They told everything to the detectives investigating the case, and soon everything began to become clear. The perpetrator, who took the lives of Sally and her nephew, drove away in the owner's car and got into an accident. Now he was most likely injured and trying to escape on foot. Local residents were horrified at the thought that a dangerous criminal was roaming their quiet town, one who robbed and set houses on fire and then shot the owners. It was unknown what he would do next and who he would choose as his next victim. The police began to act quickly. Residents were advised to go to their homes and not go outside unless necessary. In search of evidence and the murder weapon, detectives searched the Snowden house. Divers were sent to Horseshoe Lake, but nothing was found in the house or at the bottom of the reservoir. However, a thorough inspection of the red Toyota Camry provided some small leads. On the passenger side door handle, criminologists discovered fingerprints that belonged to neither Sally nor Joseph. In addition, several dark hairs were found on the seat. The thing is that the criminal database appeared in the United States only in 1997. It was initially impossible to check the found fingerprints and hairs. The detectives were sure that this was not the first attack on the perpetrator's record, and that not every burglar carried a pistol with him and was ready to use it. The investigation moved very slowly. In the small town, there were not enough police officers, not enough resources, and not enough funding. Nevertheless, the authorities did what they could. They interviewed witnesses and talked to neighbors. From morning until evening, they combed the area in search of any leads, and this bore fruit. One local resident noticed the red Toyota Camry racing down the road at high speed on the day of the incident, even before it overturned. According to the eyewitness, two young black men were sitting behind the wheel and in the passenger seat. Unfortunately, he did not have time to see their faces. Although this was only a small piece of information, it allowed the detectives to narrow the circle of suspects a little. The area where Sally's mansion was located was populated predominantly by white residents, and people of a different skin color immediately came under attention. Meanwhile, the interviews continued. The police were looking for a person who could have had access to the Snowden house. One of the young sons of the deceased Joseph Liebecker told them about a black boy whose mother worked as a cleaner for Sally. The teenager lived on the grounds of the mansion in one of the cottages on the shore of the lake. He was raised by his mother and grandmother, and this teenager turned out to be 15-year-old Travis Lewis. It turned out that Travis had already committed minor crimes. A year before Sally's death, the young man had stolen several checks from her. The naive youth believed that he could easily cash them at the bank. However, when Travis tried to do so, he was refused. The institution immediately suspected fraud and contacted the account owner, Sally. Later, Travis managed to steal several video games from Joseph Liebecker's children. The thing is that the latter often invited the cleaner's son out of pity to play video games with them, and Travis decided not to miss the opportunity to profit. There were other minor pranks by the teenager, but each time Sally McKay forgave the cleaner's son. She was a very understanding woman. Because of poverty, Travis was deprived of many things. The mansion owner believed that in this way, he was trying to compensate for a happy childhood. Now the question arose whether Sally's excessive kindness had become her curse. Could it be that Travis, having avoided consequences for his minor thefts, became more confident in himself and decided to commit something serious, for example, robbing the cottage? This was a terrible version. The number one suspect in the double murder case was a teenage boy from the family that worked at the mansion. And Joseph Liebaker taught Travis English at the local high school. Liebaker's children were friends with Lewis. This kid was very closely connected to the lives of the deceased. Travis's whereabouts on the day of the crime could not be established, as he had been suspended from school. The teenager denied involvement in the burglary and shooting and provided the police with an alibi. But his alibi was unconvincing. He insisted that he had spent the entire day at home with his mother. And although his mother confirmed his words, she could have lied just to protect her son from prison. To make sure Travis's words were truthful, the authorities decided to test him on a lie detector. A polygraph is a device that records a person's physiological reactions during questioning. It does not detect lies at all. It measures pulse, breathing, blood pressure, and other factors. The polygraph does not recognize lies. It only analyzes changes in the body. The problem with lie detector tests is that a person may simply be experiencing stress and nervousness, but the device will interpret these signals as anxiety about telling a falsehood. Polygraph tests are no longer used in criminal cases because they are unreliable, but earlier the polygraph was considered serious evidence of guilt. Travis Lewis was forced to undergo a polygraph test, and it showed that the guy was not lying. They believed the polygraph and immediately released him. The investigation continued. However, all roads still led to this guy. There simply were no other suspects. Not finding other criminals, the police made Travis take another polygraph test. The second time, the teenager failed the test, and they believed the polygraph again. As a result, the guy was arrested for breaking and entering, robbery, and double murder, relying only on the results of the lie detector. After the arrest, Lewis's story changed dramatically. Now he insisted that he did not participate in the murder, but no longer denied the break-in and theft. He told the police that he had not acted alone and tried to shift all the blame onto his friend Andre. According to Travis, they had developed a plan. He was supposed to rob Joseph Liebaker's house, and Andre was supposed to rob Sally McKay's cottage. The guys split up, and each went to carry out his part of the agreement. Sometime later, Andre came for him in the red Toyota Camry. His friend admitted that the robbery had not gone according to plan. He had to take the lives of 2 people. Andre begged Travis to get in the car and escape as quickly as possible before they were discovered. The story matched what the local resident had seen. 2 young black guys in a red car were speeding at high speed. The police arrested Andre, but the guy denied everything. There was no evidence against him except circumstantial. The detectives decided not to bother and released the teenager. They decided not to use the polygraph this time. What if it showed the wrong thing, since they already had 1 underage criminal in custody? Travis's situation was bad. His fingerprints matched the fingerprints found in the stolen car. The 16-year-old was charged with burglary and double murder. In addition, his DNA matched the DNA of the hairs found in the Toyota. Many people believed that Andre had gotten away with a serious crime, and now his friend had to take the fall alone. The authorities decided that the now 16-year-old Travis Lewis would be tried as an adult. In the state of Arkansas, this meant that for 2 stolen lives, he could face the death penalty. Martha McKay, one of Sally's 3 daughters, was devastated by the loss of her mother and cousin and was incredibly angry at Travis. But even she considered the execution of a minor youth too harsh a punishment. This contradicted her beliefs and values. Martha spoke out against the death sentence and ultimately got her way. At the trial, Travis, on the advice of his lawyers, pleaded guilty to a first-degree felony. He was sentenced to 28.5 years in prison. However, in prison, he recanted his confession, again shifting all the blame onto his friend Andre. Only now Travis could no longer change the testimony he had given under oath. Sally Snowden McKay and Joseph Lee Baker were dead. The criminal who had taken the lives of 2 people was serving his sentence behind bars. But the horrific story did not end there. After the tragedy, the Snowden house passed into the ownership of one of Sally's sisters. About 10 years later, management of the family business fell on the shoulders of the children of the deceased. Sally's daughter, who had once spoken out against the death penalty for a minor criminal, now moved into one of the cottages on the shore of the lake. Martha McKay grew up in San Francisco, California. She graduated from the University of Washington in Seattle, and several years after her mother's death, returned to Horseshoe Lake, Arkansas, to take care of the Snowden house. At that time, repairs had begun in the mansion. The new owner wanted to completely update the interior so that it would match the spirit of the 21st century. Martha replaced the plumbing and interior finishing, updated the outdated lighting fixtures and hardware, and added modern elements to the outdated design. As a result, the legendary Snowden house, built in colonial style, began to look completely different, more modern. Martha McKay was a successful businesswoman who was written about in local magazines. The woman quickly gained popularity in the area. Everyone simply adored her. She had a certain gift for charming people. Martha was sociable, cheerful, and enterprising. Every day she walked her dog around the reservoir, sometimes several times. Local residents affectionately nicknamed her the Lady of the Lake. Martha enjoyed life. She loved her house so much that she created a special page on social media. There, the woman posted updates showing everything that was happening behind the walls of the renovated mansion: dinner parties, social dinners, relaxing in hammocks on the shore of the lake, and much more. Now it was not just a family mansion, it was the woman's pride. She literally breathed new life into the place where a bloody family tragedy had occurred several years earlier. In reality, Martha had grieved for a long time after her mother's death, and to somehow come to terms with it, she chose an unusual way. The woman began to practice Buddhism, whose main goal was to learn to love everyone, be kind to everyone, and most importantly, to forgive the one who caused you pain. In the end, Martha did something incredible. She forgave the man who had been convicted of murdering her mother. The woman felt that he had repented of what he had done. Wanting to demonstrate the decision she had made, she wrote to Travis Lewis in prison. He replied, thanking her for the forgiveness. This is how their correspondence began, and a more than strange friendship started. Upon learning about this, the family was shocked, and Martha moved from letters to actions. She asked for the opportunity to visit Travis in prison. Relatives tried to convince her not to do it, but Martha was adamant. She believed that by sincerely forgiving the murderer's soul, she would be able to cope with the grief and come to terms with the loss of a loved one. In addition, Martha was not completely sure of his guilt. After all, according to Travis, it was his friend Andre who had pulled the trigger. It was Lewis who had to take the fall for the crime, and this apparent injustice only strengthened Martha's feelings. Now the woman regularly visited the convicted criminal in prison, and in between visits she wrote letters to him. Despite the 24-year age difference, their friendship grew stronger. The family did not understand how Martha could communicate with the man who had taken the lives of 2 people close to them. They did not believe that Travis had reformed, and worried that now Martha, by meeting with him, was putting herself in danger. In 2018, Lewis filed for parole. Martha also took part in the hearing and very loudly expressed her position. She believed that Travis deserved a second chance and should be released as soon as possible. Martha McKay's testimony was very convincing. No parole board had ever heard a victim's daughter fight for the release of the criminal who had taken her mother's life, and it worked. In 2018, Travis Lewis was released after 2 decades in prison. At that time, he was 37 years old. He had gone to prison as a teenager. For the first time in his adult life, he found himself in a world where there was no familiar circle of acquaintances. Martha McKay understood that without support, Travis's rehabilitation could drag on. The woman decided to take him under her wing and help the man adapt to his new life. She offered him a job as a gardener at the Snowden house, where he had once taken the lives of her mother and cousin. And what was even worse, she invited Lewis to settle in one of the cottages on the shore of the lake. Travis's mother, Gladys, all the time while her son was in prison, continued to work as a cleaner in the mansion, and now mother and son were reunited. During the first year, everything went perfectly. Martha's plan worked. Travis seemed like a changed man. However, soon his enthusiasm for freedom faded, and the man returned to his old habits. Regular use of illegal drugs and skipping work became the norm. This caused dissatisfaction and disappointment on Martha's part. After everything she had done for him, Travis openly ignored her comments and requests. Over time, Lewis began to steal. Minor crimes began to multiply. History was repeating itself. When Travis was 15 years old, he also stole. His own mother, Gladys, was the most worried about this. One day, Gladys took Martha McKay aside and warned her to stay away from her son because he had gone back to his old ways. In early 2020, Martha sold one of the most magnificent chandeliers from the mansion for $10,000. She was paid in cash. The money lay in the Snowden house for several days, but then it suddenly disappeared. Suspicion immediately fell on Travis, who was one of the few who knew about the presence of money in the house. In addition, he had a habit of taking whatever was lying around. The naive Martha was shocked and disappointed. The man she had sincerely tried to help had betrayed her in the worst possible way. This finally convinced her that Travis had not changed and could not be trusted. Martha made the difficult decision to fire Lewis from his position as gardener and ask him to move out of the cottage on the shore of the lake that she had kindly provided to him. But the man reacted extremely negatively. A terrible quarrel broke out between them. Travis got angry. The former convict refused to admit that he was doing anything wrong. The man was used to being forgiven for everything, so why was he being punished this time? However, the owner of the house desperately insisted that Travis leave her property, and the man had to do so. Enraged by what he saw as injustice, Travis slammed the door loudly and left. Martha hoped that this would be the end of it, but she was wrong. Lewis returned this time with even more sinister thoughts. On the morning of March 25th, 2020, the police received a signal about the alarm going off at the Snowden house on Horseshoe Lake. They hurried to the scene and discovered that the back door of the house was wide open. The officers went inside and called for the owner. There was silence in the house. No one responded to the police officers' calls, but the employees clearly heard footsteps. Someone was walking upstairs. There were definitely people in the mansion, but they did not want to be discovered, so they did not respond. The officers began to slowly climb the stairs when a black man jumped out of a second-floor window. In an attempt to escape, he rushed to a car parked nearby, but the car would not start. The fugitive jumped out, looked around, and realized that he could not escape. There were police officers everywhere. Swimming across the lake was the only chance of salvation. The man rushed to the reservoir at full speed and dived in. The police stopped on the shore to see in which direction he would swim. No one appeared on the surface of the water. The officers rushed into the lake to the place where the criminal had dived, but they could not find anyone. The man simply disappeared. At that moment, it was unclear whether he had drowned immediately or whether he had managed to hold his breath and somehow miraculously escape from the law enforcement officers. In any case, it looked like some kind of trick. The suspect literally dissolved in the water. The police had to warn the residents of the area about the incident. While some officers went from house to house, others went to Martha McKay's mansion. Rushing in pursuit of the fugitive, they did not have time to properly examine the rooms. Soon, it became clear that the man had tried to escape from the crime scene. On the upper landing of the stairs lay a pile of bedding soaked in some flammable substance. A strong smell of fuel hit the nostrils. Inside the bundle lay the dead body of 63-year-old Martha McKay. Because of the numerous wounds on the owner's body, the bedding was soaked in red. She had been brutally killed. Martha became the third member of the family to die in the family estate, and the perpetrator was the same person who several decades earlier had taken the lives of her mother and cousin. Travis Lewis had returned to rob and finish off the family that had shown him compassion all his life and had forgiven even the most cruel offenses. The bottom of the reservoir had to be scanned with a special device, which found something. Several hours after Martha McKay's death, the dead body of her murderer, Travis Lewis, was raised from the depths of the lake. It turned out that he had drowned almost instantly after jumping into the water. the man was under the influence of a whole cocktail of illegal drugs. Perhaps he lost consciousness, hit his head on something, or simply could not rise to the surface to take a breath of air. Travis Lewis died at the age of 39. The man who had terrorized the McKay family for decades disappeared in an instant. Not understanding what he was doing, Lewis had sentenced himself to death and had even carried out the sentence himself. The motive for the crime was again a failed robbery. By a cruel irony of fate, mother and daughter had prematurely left this world because of the same person, with a difference of 23 years. The McKay family was in complete despair. They simply could not believe that something like this could happen again. Although other relatives had never approved of Martha's friendship with Travis, they had not even allowed the thought that a good attitude toward the criminal would backfire on her and that her life would end in such a terrible way. As for the Snowden house, since 2024, it has been owned by a new family. Currently, the building is planned to be demolished in order to build a completely new mansion in its place, hoping that this will protect the place from the curse. If you are finished watching, you're a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and give it a like. See you in the next video.